Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering college costs explode, private schools face financial collapse. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from Fortune, college isn't just expensive for students, it's also expensive for colleges, and the squeeze is worsening for private schools. And from highereddive.com, we can't cut it anymore. Can colleges recover from the gut punch of inflation? Colleges are shutting down, and not just one or two, multiple private colleges are shutting down nationwide. Costs are out of control, tuitions are out of control, and they still can't operate properly. What's the main problem? Enrollment is down, inflation is up. They're not offering a service that people can actually use and get value from it. It happens in every business. If you don't have something of value, eventually people stop paying for it. When the small nonprofit university St. Catherine announced it would close this spring, the president of the California-based institution placed partial blame for its cash crunch on extraordinary inflation. St. Catherine is hardly alone in that lament. Over the past few months, Pittsburgh Technical College, Delaware College of Art and Design, Wells College, and Goddard College also cited inflation or rising costs when announcing decisions to close down their institutions. Even colleges and universities on somewhat better footing are feeling the pain of inflation. A recent budget proposed by University of Minnesota's interim president included some form of the word inflation 25 times, citing increased costs for food, services, and labor, among other things. While higher ed inflation slowed over the last year, costs for institutions sit well above pre-pandemic levels, injecting financial pressure, especially for colleges without deep pockets, to weather the difficulties. Yet, the need to invest in the institution remains an imperative, adding to the bind those colleges are in. Now many are saying, in effect, quote, we can't cut any more expenses. We've got to invest in our people, invest in our staff, our facilities, said Timothy Yates Jr., president and CEO of Common Fund OCIO, which provides asset management services to higher education institutions and other nonprofits. Quote, the cost reduction piece of the equation has run its course. They can't cut anymore. They can't lay more people off. What they should be doing is looking at what are you actually offering that people want? What makes it value for money when people spend tens of thousands of dollars going into debt to go to your schools? And of course, cut the diversity, equity, and inclusion departments. They're divisive, they're a waste of money, and they're not actually attracting any new students. Over the past 40 years, higher education costs have diverged from those in the economy overall. That's one reason why Common Fund Institute annually calculates its own metric for the sector, called the Higher Education Price Index, or HEPI, starting in the mid-1980s, with costs for higher ed institutions rising at a higher rate than CPI for most years. CPI, a common measure of inflation. Quote, we think it's more expensive to run a college and a university as opposed to running a family, though both are very important, said George Suttles, executive director of the Common Fund Institute. Some of HEPI's largest components consist of personnel costs, salaries for faculty, clerical, administrative, and service workers, as well as fringe benefits. Suttles and Yates noted that colleges use the HEPI for budget planning. Endowment managers also use the metric to help set targets for investment returns, which typically need to account for inflation. Determining the inflation rate that colleges are likely to face matters quite a bit, Yates said. Yeah, because if their inflation just goes up a little bit, their costs all go up to match that inflation. And then there are input costs. So if they're going to do construction, if they're going to hire more faculty, anything they're going to do, as inflation goes up, their costs go up dramatically. And then they have to try to build that into tuitions and try to find more donors and subsidies to keep operating. And not all of them are able to do it. Well, does your endowment need to keep up with heavy inflation, or does it only need to keep up with CPI inflation, Yates said. Most of the time, CPI does not reflect the cost structure of the colleges we work with. Last year, higher ed institutions faced an inflation rate of 4%, according to the HEPI. That figure was down from 5.2% in 2022. And year after year, you've got 4% one year after a year of 5.2%. The costs go up on top of each other year after year. Everybody feels it. It may only be 4%, but if you add 4% to 5.2%, that's more than 9%. During 2022, nearly every area of cost tracked by the HEPI increased at a significantly higher rate than the year before. Some of the sharpest spikes came in supplies and materials, which were up 21.5%. Utilities, a historically volatile category, spiked by an eye-watering 43%. For 2024, Common Fund Institute estimates that the HEPI will increase at 3%, which would put the measure back into the realm of normal higher ed inflation over the past decade. However, that would also mean that costs are still growing at a significant clip on top of the recent spikes. Those cost spikes translate into added financial pressure for colleges and universities already dealing with enrollment declines, budget deficits, and the like. For colleges, inflation together with structural deficits can accelerate cash loss, noted Chuck Ambrose, a senior education consultant with law firm Hush Blackwell, who has served as chief executive at several colleges. The impact of rising costs is felt all the more deeply by smaller, non-elite colleges that lack the revenue base and endowments to absorb the pressure. Quote, universities that are not hurting as much are the ones with endowments, said Stacy Linderman, a consultant who works with the National Association of College and University Business Officers. They have that to fall back on, and some of the other institutions, if they're not getting big gifts, that impacts them. Take Wells College in New York, for example, which saw expenses grow as revenue wavered in recent years, all while running deficits. From 2021 to 2022, expenses jumped by just under 14%. They jumped again by 11% in 2023, while revenues declined by more than $1 million, or about 5.4%. During the recent years of skyrocketing inflation, businesses in other sectors responded to rising supply chain and labor costs by hiking prices to consumers to recover at least some of their lost margins. But higher ed might not have that luxury, at least not at this point in history. In a report last year, Fitch Ratings analysts pointed out that public institutions have held tuition flat and predicted that growth in private college tuition would soon abate. For the 2023 to 2024 academic year, the ratings agency concluded that muted net tuition growth combined with a challenging inflation environment would weigh on margins. That's partly because costs for attending college are already painfully high. Quote, there's a decreased tolerance in the market for continuing increases in attendance costs. According to Ricardo Aziz, director of the Center for Higher Ed Mergers and Acquisitions, said in a panel at the Higher Learning Commission's annual conference this spring, quote, there's only so much that American families can pay, and we're reaching that peak price. With rising costs on the back end combining with flat prices on the front end, something has to give. Quote, your margin is shrinking, or you're developing organizational efficiencies, Linderman said. The profit margin for these operations is getting to be at the point of zero. And even when colleges are able to marshal their resources to invest in themselves, inflation can eat away at the impact of those investments. Spending on facilities provides a vivid example. In 2023, investment in existing campus facilities grew by more than 26% year over year, according to the building intelligence firm Gordian, which called the spending spike a remarkable shift for the sector. This activity showed higher ed was chipping away at its backlog of deferred maintenance and taking care of its existing stock of buildings. At the same time, however, inflation in construction services and building supplies took a big bite out of that spending. Operating budgets climbed by more than 9.5% between 2019 and 2023, while the cost of building supplies and construction services grew 19% according to Gordian. Quote, buying power has effectively declined. Along with the challenges in raising revenue, colleges also may be running out of costs to cut. At the same time, trying to hold costs steady at an institution where those costs are often in salaries and benefits can increase morale issues in the workforce. Quote, it's hard enough just maintaining operational integrity, he added. What, if anything, can colleges do to manage inflation at this point? Given the complexity and specificity of cost structures, Linderman points to the importance of what she described as forensic budgeting. That involves closely looking at spending on items against what they should cost or could cost to see where savings might be possible. Deep analysis, including with a third-party consultant, one that would write checks to people like her, can sometimes identify areas where institutions are able to avoid costs, she said. That could increase cases where you might not be saving today, but it's a cost avoidance for the next 10 years. That's really going to help your institution. Often such strategic budgeting involves reviewing expenses in terms of potential alternatives, going over contracts with a fine-tooth comb, and looking into the nooks and crannies of an institution's operations to see where money can be saved. Quote, are we locked into something that we signed 10 years ago that's not beneficial to us anymore, Linderman said. Do we have cost-saving ideas like shut the lights off when you're not in the rooms, or do elevator maintenance so you don't let the elevator crash and spend $1 million rather than $200,000? From a financial standpoint, it sounds like they really are getting desperate. These are pretty serious times, especially for private colleges. These ideas tend to be institution-specific, Linderman added. Depending on the college, costs could be hiding in information technology systems and contracts or class sizes, or in legal risks that could become liabilities later, or any number of areas. Colleges might also start looking outside the institution for helping lowering costs. Ambrose said he anticipates that more staff will be replaced with artificial intelligence applications and technology, or through consolidation in the sector. Endowments can provide relief as well if an institution has a sizable endowment. Quote, the other level that colleges and universities hold is fundraising and advancement, Suttle said. The larger, more sophisticated fundraising operations might try to structure gifts and payouts to provide access to more of the real dollars sooner, he noted. Given higher ed's long history of high and steeply rising costs, fundraising has been used to hedge against inflation by providing scholarships and aid to students who can't afford the dizzying costs of attendance. In that sense, inflation is built into the fundraising process in the same way that fits into the return targets for endowments. Colleges can appeal to donors with a pitch that highlights the effects of inflation, according to Suttles. They can say, in effect, quote, we're trying to make sure that this college experience is affordable for future generations, and that resonates with folks. They're doing whatever they can do to try to raise money to cover their costs, but inflation is killing them because they're also hiring an absurd amount of staff. Here's one example of the crazy hiring from the collegefix.com. MIT grew staff by 1,200 while enrollment barely budged. By 1,200 people, that's 1,200 salaries and benefits packages they're paying out. Colleges have been getting a bad reputation lately. Way too much of the DEI, way too much of having people in charge of colleges who are caught plagiarizing their dissertations and not held to the same standards that they're trying to hold their students to. Donors pulling back from colleges. And with inflation coming in and absolutely ravaging their budgets, a lot of private colleges just can't keep up. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.